Naoto is a bookish young man who is still a virgin. He is very shy around girls. So, he cannot interact with any girl. But, one girl changed his life. She always teases Naoto and makes him her source of entertainment, which leads them to fall in love with each other. Everything started when Naoto was at the library. But, 4 girls were paying attention to him, which made him nervous, because he didn't dare to look them in the eyes. So, he had to try to stay calm. Suddenly, one girl walked up to him, making Naoto nervous. He accidentally dropped his bag. Unexpectedly, the girl discovered that he was drawing manga, which made them interested. They kept teasing Naoto's manga without mercy, because he wanted to create a famous series like One Piece, which made him embarrassed. When they left, suddenly, one girl took an interest in his manga. Toro gave a sinister smile, which made him anxious. At that moment, Toro found Naoto's manga very interesting. His manga tells the story of a knight protecting a princess, and that knight is in love with the princess. But, he doesn't dare to confess, which made Naoto embarrassed. However, he still had to try to stay calm. Suddenly, she said that Naoto was as pitiful as the knight, which made her laugh. But, Naoto didn't understand how he was pitiful. So, Toro decided to act it out like a manga for him. She immediately threw a series of punches and kicks, which surprised Naoto. It was Naoto's turn. He had to lift her hair, making Naoto very nervous. But, he still didn't dare to touch Toro, which amused her, because the knight in the manga was just as shy around girls as he was, making Naoto flustered. She realized he didn't dare to look into her eyes. Toro saw that Naoto was about to cry, which entertained her, and she immediately took a handkerchief to wipe his tears, making Naoto feel helpless. After that, Toro gave him the handkerchief as compensation for bullying him. That night, Naoto was still haunted by Toro, which made him unable to sleep. The next morning, when Naoto arrived at the art room, he encountered Toro again. So, Naoto returned the towel to her. But, Toro kept following Naoto. She realized that no one else was there. So, she told Naoto to draw her. She even wanted Naoto to draw her looking really hot, which made him embarrassed. So, Naoto just wanted to draw her normally. At this moment, Naoto still couldn't draw Toro, because he had never dared to look directly at a girl before. Suddenly, Toro said, "If you draw well, I'll reward you," which excited Naoto. He didn't know what she would reward him with. So, he became determined to draw her. By the afternoon, Naoto had finished drawing. Even though it was just a sketch, Toro still decided to reward him. Naoto thought she would kiss him, which made him nervous. But, Toro continued teasing Naoto, because she wanted to see his embarrassed face. Naoto didn't even dare to look at her thighs to draw them. Toro kept teasing Naoto, which made him cry once again. So, Toro had to comfort him. At this moment, she continued clinging to Naoto. He didn't know how to make Toro go away. Suddenly, she had a request for Naoto. "Go out with me," which shocked Naoto. He didn't know how to respond. But, it was just another joke from Toro, which made him so embarrassed that he wanted to run away. Accidentally, Toro pushed him into the water. But, Naoto acted like nothing had happened. Toro didn't understand why he wasn't mad at her, which made him remember how he was always bullied. So, he had gotten used to it. Meanwhile, Toro thought Naoto had started liking her. Naoto quickly explained, he always had to suppress his anger, because Naoto wanted to talk to her. So, he asked, "What's your name?" which amused her. She told him her name was Toro. The next morning, Naoto was drawing. Suddenly, Toro appeared again. She told Naoto to hula hoop with her. When he bent down, Naoto accidentally saw her underwear, which made them both embarrassed. During lunchtime, Naoto was excited about the new manga he had just bought. Suddenly, Toro arrived. So, he quickly hid his manga. But, she noticed that Naoto was hiding something, and she discovered his new manga. He immediately tried to take it back. But, Toro said she would do it for him, which made Naoto embarrassed. And so, she snatched the manga away. Suddenly, she realized it was an adult manga. So, she thought Naoto was a pervert, which made Naoto embarrassed, and he kept getting teased by Toro. But, Naoto explained that it was just a romantic vampire manga. After reading the whole manga, Toro realized it was actually captivating and romantic. But, she felt the male protagonist resembled Naoto, because he was a shy guy who got his blood sucked by vampires. However, Toro told Naoto that wouldn't happen to him, because he was a virgin. So, vampires wouldn't be interested in him, which made Naoto embarrassed. He didn't understand how she knew he was a virgin. Toro said she was actually a vampire, which scared Naoto. Suddenly, Toro wanted to bite his neck, and she showed Naoto her fangs, making him think Toro was really a vampire. And so, she caught Naoto, which terrified him, as Toro was about to bite his neck. Luckily, Naoto's bad breath saved him. But, Toro still didn't give up. In the afternoon, when they were walking home from school, Toro kept following Naoto. She asked how it felt for him to touch a girl for the first time, which made Naoto blush. He didn't know how to explain. So, Toro tried touching him instead, which she found very amusing. After that, Toro said goodbye to Naoto and ran home. That night, Naoto was reading manga, but he still kept thinking about Toro, which made him embarrassed. The next morning, Toro invited Naoto to play a game with her. Whoever won would get to make the loser do anything they wanted. Naoto thought this was his chance to stop Toro from teasing him. So, he immediately agreed. When Toro was about to touch him, Naoto imagined she was drawing a bow, which made him feel extremely ticklish and unable to endure it. So, Naoto lost. At that moment, Toro didn't know what to request from him. But, Naoto said it was his turn, while Toro thought he wouldn't dare to touch her. However, Naoto was getting closer to her, which made Toro nervous. Luckily, her phone rang, so Toro had an excuse to run away. In the afternoon, Naoto went to a cafe to draw manga, because it was very quiet there. Unexpectedly, Toro's group also arrived, which made him nervous. At that moment, Naoto realized the two guys were from the class next to his. While Naoto's friend was enjoying the moment, Toro didn't pay any attention to them. Naoto noticed that Toro looked very uncomfortable. He thought she would tease those guys just like she teased him. But, Toro seemed uninterested, which surprised Naoto, because she didn't tease them like she did with him. She even made the two guys leave in disappointment. At that moment, Naoto was confused. Why did Toro only tease him? Suddenly, he ran into Toro. So, they walked home together. Unexpectedly, she continued teasing Naoto, which made him embarrassed. But, he didn't dare to ask her why she teased him. The next morning, Naoto was practicing drawing. Suddenly, Toro offered to be his model. But, he said he preferred drawing objects. Unexpectedly, Toro took off her shirt, which made Naoto flustered. It turned out she was wearing a swimsuit. After school, on their way home, they were caught in heavy rain, which soaked them both. Luckily, they found a place to take shelter. At that moment, Toro told Naoto not to look at her, because her uniform had become see-through, which made Naoto excited. Toro immediately teased Naoto. She was sure he really wanted to look at her, which made Naoto embarrassed. But, Naoto thought she was still wearing her swimsuit. So, he decided to turn around and look. Unexpectedly, Toro's uniform was actually transparent, which made both of them embarrassed. At that moment, Toro was certain that Naoto was a pervert. Suddenly, a strong gust of wind blew through, which made Toro catch a cold. Naoto realized they needed to get home quickly. Since Toro's house was nearby, she invited Naoto to take shelter at her place. When he arrived at Toro's house, he felt nervous, because Naoto thought Toro's parents would have the same personality as her. But, Toro said no one was home. At that moment, she handed Naoto a change of clothes. Suddenly, he realized it was Toro's bath towel, which made Naoto embarrassed. While he waited for his clothes to dry, Toro asked him, "Is this your first time in a girl's room?" Which made Naoto flustered. So, he said it was a secret. Toro became curious. She wondered what boys did in a girl's room, which made Naoto even more nervous. Suddenly, Toro grabbed Naoto's hand. He thought Toro wanted to kiss him. But, it turned out she just wanted to invite him to play a game. Then, they started playing games together. However, Naoto was really good at gaming. Naoto won against Toro. But, she was really angry. Naoto realized this was his chance for revenge, since he had been holding back all this time. When he was about to win against Toro again, suddenly, she blew into Naoto's ear. Toro quickly turned the tables, and she won the match. In the following rounds, Toro kept teasing Naoto, but they both had a lot of fun. By the afternoon, Naoto was ready to go home. He said he had a great time playing games today. So, Naoto invited her to play with him again next time, and she declared that she would turn Naoto into a pervert. The next morning, Naoto was looking for a place to eat lunch, but the school cafeteria was too crowded. So, Toro told him to come sit near her, which made him nervous, because it was the worst possible place. But he had no other choice. So, he had to sit with them. Two girls asked him if he was Toro's boyfriend. Unexpectedly, Toro admitted that they were dating, which made him embarrassed. They wanted to know how far the two had gone. So, the girls also started teasing Naoto. They felt that Naoto was like Toro's pet. When one of the girls tried to touch Naoto, Toro immediately stopped her. At that moment, they realized Naoto was more like her servant. Suddenly, they started criticizing Naoto even more harshly. This made Toro angry. Naoto noticed that Toro was actually defending him. So, Naoto stood up and declared, "I'm not Toro's boyfriend." This made everyone turn their attention to him, and the two girls burst into laughter. That afternoon, Toro complained to Naoto, because he never fought back against anyone. Toro told him he should hit them back. But Naoto thought that wouldn't work. So, Toro decided to tease Naoto herself, which made him so frustrated that he finally fought back against Toro. She was impressed by how well he did. So, she insulted him even more harshly. This made Naoto so mad that he almost cried. Accidentally, he ended up hitting Toro's chest. This made them both embarrassed. So, Toro teased him again, calling him a pervert. Later, Naoto was washing his hands after painting with oil paints. Suddenly, Toro appeared again. It turned out that she spilled the juice. When Naoto was embarrassed, because Toro was standing very close to him. Suddenly, Toro said, the way they washed their hands was like they were bathing together, which shocked Naoto. Toro immediately offered to help him wash his hands, making Naoto so scared that he ran away. The next day, Naoto was eating lunch alone. He kept thinking that Toro was coming to find him. But it was Maki and Yoshi, which shocked him. They teased Naoto for being a loner, since he always ate alone. So, they sat and watched him eat, leaving Naoto feeling helpless. He just wished they would leave soon. Suddenly, Maki asked if he had ever touched someone's chest before, which shocked him. So, they realized Naoto was still a virgin. Both of them kept teasing Naoto, making him so scared that he ran away. But they immediately caught him, forcing him to touch their chests, leaving Naoto helpless. However, it turned out to be just two anpan buns. Suddenly, Toro appeared. So, Maki and Yoshi immediately ran away. At this moment, Naoto felt that Toro was unusually silent. This made him worried. She blamed Naoto, because he had touched them. But he said he only touched the anpan. This immediately made Toro happy again. She continued to tease Naoto. Toro told him to touch her. She took out a premium anpan, and Toro told Naoto to choose. Then, she stuffed two anpans into her shirt, to force Naoto to touch them. Accidentally, one anpan fell out. This shocked Naoto, because he realized that what he touched was not anpan. This made Toro angry. She kept hitting Naoto. The next morning, Naoto realized that Toro had come over again. It turned out that yesterday she had promised to be his model for drawing. Since Toro pressured him, he had no choice but to accept. Suddenly, Toro pushed a sofa over, because she felt that lying on this sofa was very comfortable. At this moment, Naoto was paying attention to Hosokawa from the baseball team. Toro said that he was a superstar. This made Naoto jealous, because Toro was paying attention to Hosokawa. He also wanted to be cheered on by those around him. But Naoto had no talent at all. Toro asked if he had ever praised anyone before, because she believed that if he had never praised others, he would never be praised himself. So, Toro suggested that he practice by complimenting her. But Naoto didn't know how to compliment her. Thus, he ended up praising Toro's hair for being smooth and beautiful. This delighted her. So, she wanted Naoto to keep complimenting her. Suddenly, he praised Toro's kick from before, saying it was amazing. This made her blush. So, she decided to compliment Naoto in return. But she couldn't think of anything to praise him for. Then, Toro complimented Naoto's face, saying it looked funny. This embarrassed him. Toro kept teasing Naoto. So, he told her to hurry up and be his model. But Toro kept striking attractive poses, which made Naoto flustered. So, He told her to just pose normally. Then, Naoto started drawing Toro. But, he was still too embarrassed to look directly at her. Toro saw him blushing, which delighted her, because he was only focusing on her skirt. By the afternoon, Naoto still hadn't drawn anything. He blamed Toro for constantly moving. Suddenly, Toro felt sleepy. Very quickly, she dozed off. Naoto thought she looked really cute. So, he was finally able to draw Toro. In the end, he finished his drawing. Unexpectedly, Toro woke up. She decided to reward Naoto. He thought she was about to kiss him. But, Toro kissed him using a doll. This shocked Naoto. However, Toro really liked the drawing. The next morning, Toro continued teasing Naoto. But, he didn't react. This made her feel strange. Suddenly, Maki and Yoshi appeared as well. They invited Naoto to hang out with them, which annoyed Toro. To her surprise, Naoto agreed to go with them, leaving Toro in shock. It turned out that it was just Toro's dream. At that moment, Toro was still staring at Naoto. This made him worried. Suddenly, she said that if Naoto was a virgin, he would be extra ticklish. This scared him, and he ran away. But, Toro still managed to catch him. So, she relentlessly tickled Naoto. Finally, Toro decided to stop, but Naoto asked, "What about you?" Toro confidently replied that she wouldn't feel ticklish, and that Naoto would never dare to tickle a girl. But, Naoto said he could tickle Toro. So, she took off her shirt, daring him to do it. This made Naoto flustered. He imagined that he could easily tickle her. As he was about to touch Toro, she suddenly got nervous. So, she changed her mind and pulled her hand back. Then, Toro showed Naoto a video of sheep shearing. Naoto didn't understand why Toro found the video so amusing. Suddenly, she felt that Naoto's hair looked like sheep's wool, which excited her. So, she wanted to cut his hair. But, Naoto said he would go to the barber tomorrow. Suddenly, Toro pulled out a hair clipper, which made Naoto nervous. While Toro looked thrilled, she would feel satisfied if she could cut off all of Naoto's fluffy hair, which terrified him. Naoto said he had never cut his hair too short. So, the barber never needed to use a hair clipper. Then, Toro switched to using scissors instead. She kept trying to convince Naoto to let her cut his hair, saying that she often cut her older brother's hair at home. This made Naoto nervous. But, he still decided to let Toro cut his hair. Suddenly, Toro got a phone call. It turned out that Maki and Yoshi wanted to return her math notebook, and they were waiting for her in class. So, Toro had to return to her classroom. She told Naoto to wait for her. As soon as Toro left, Maki and Yoshi suddenly appeared, shocking Naoto. They assumed this place was a love nest for him and Toro. Then, they noticed that Toro was about to cut Naoto's hair. So, they also wanted to cut it. When Toro arrived at her classroom, she didn't see Maki or Yoshi anywhere. Meanwhile, Maki was trying to cut Naoto's hair. Suddenly, Naoto remembered that he had to let Toro do it. So, he resisted them. But, they still wouldn't give up. He said that he had promised to let Toro cut his hair. Luckily, she had returned just in time, surprising Maki and Yoshi. At that moment, Toro was furious. So, they quickly handed the hair clipper back to her and ran away. After that, Toro started cutting Naoto's hair. When she finished, he realized that Toro had done a great job. So, Naoto thanked her, which made Toro embarrassed. The next morning, they felt that the weather was really hot. So, Toro invited Naoto to go eat shaved ice. She imagined eating a huge bowl of shaved ice. When they arrived, they saw a long line of people. It turned out the shop had been featured on TV yesterday. So, Toro dragged Naoto into the line. She was determined to eat shaved ice. While Naoto felt that they could just get ice cream from a convenience store, this made Toro look terrifying. So, he had no choice but to line up with her. Naoto noticed that two guys behind them were staring at Toro. It turned out that her shirt had become see-through. This made Naoto furious. So, he quickly covered Toro. At that moment, Toro was feeling really hot. But, she was still determined to eat shaved ice. Naoto realized that Toro was not okay. So, he quickly pulled her away. After that, Naoto bought water for Toro, because he was afraid that Toro would suffer from heat stroke. When she drank the water, Toro immediately felt better. But, she was disappointed that she couldn't eat shaved ice anymore. Suddenly, Toro told Naoto to wait a moment. It turned out she went to buy ice cream for Naoto. She wanted to thank Naoto for helping her. At that moment, they realized that convenience store ice cream was also delicious. By the afternoon, they realized that their summer vacation would start tomorrow. Naoto didn't know what he would do, and he thought Toro wouldn't be able to cause trouble for him anymore. Suddenly, Toro grabbed Naoto's water and drank it, and she suggested exchanging contact information. This made Toro very excited, because she got Naoto's ID, and she immediately added Naoto to her favorites. This made Naoto realize that Toro was really cute. At that moment, they said goodbye. Suddenly, Naoto realized that Toro had drunk from his water bottle. He felt like they had just shared an indirect kiss. When Naoto was about to drink water, suddenly, Toro called out to him. It turned out she was still watching Naoto. At that moment, Naoto woke up. He found himself in a different world. The girl told him Naoto had become the hero of this world. This surprised him, because he had to fight the demon king. But Naoto said he had no skills at all. Suddenly, she said his unique skill was to remain a virgin for life. And she immediately pushed him down. This terrified Naoto. He couldn't fly. Luckily, Naoto accidentally used magic, so he landed safely. Suddenly, he encountered a giant lizard. Thus, Naoto started running, and he tried using lightning magic to attack it. Unexpectedly, it wasn't hurt at all. When it was about to eat Naoto, Toro suddenly appeared and saved him. This shocked him. She said she would help Naoto defeat the demon king. And so, they fought together. At that moment, they arrived at a dragon's lair. Toro immediately attacked it, but it was too strong. The dragon immediately knocked Toro back. When it breathed fire at her, Naoto blocked the attack for Toro. And so, they fought it together. Naoto strengthened Toro, and she kicked the dragon in the head. Just like that, they defeated it. This made Toro very happy. So, she kissed him. She believed that Naoto could defeat the demon king. Suddenly, the dragon transformed into Maki, which made Toro even happier. Naoto realized that Maki had been controlled by the demon king. Suddenly, the dragon egg hatched. It turned out she was Yoshi. After that, they all headed toward the demon king's lair. At that moment, they entered the castle, but they didn't see the demon king anywhere. Suddenly, Toro, Maki and Yoshi all transformed into demons. This shocked Naoto. It turned out they were the demon king all along. Naoto realized they had tricked him. So, he attacked them, but his magic had no effect. At that moment, Naoto realized her kiss was fake. And so, Toro decided to turn him into her toy. He woke up in fear. It turned out Naoto was just dreaming. Everyone in the cafe was staring at him. Suddenly, Naoto ran into Toro's group, which made him flustered. So, he quickly left. Toro noticed that he had dropped his manga sketchbook, which intrigued her. So, she chased after Naoto. She realized that Naoto was drawing her, but he denied it. She decided to keep his sketchbook. The next morning, Naoto was watching TV about the beach. Suddenly, Toro called him, which made Naoto nervous. She guessed that Naoto was eating ice cream while watching TV. So, she invited him to go to the beach. The next morning, Naoto met up with Toro's group, which excited the girls. Toro thought Naoto was like a sea roach, which annoyed him, because they kept teasing Naoto. Finally, they arrived at the beach. At that moment, Naoto saw Maki in a swimsuit, which made him embarrassed. She and Yoshi immediately started teasing Naoto. This annoyed Toro. So, she also showed off her swimsuit to Naoto. At that moment, they asked Naoto to swim with them. But, he didn't know how to swim. They all thought Naoto really was like a sea roach. After that, the girls had a swimming race. Toro noticed Naoto sitting alone, which made her worried. So, she went over to talk to him. Toro asked if he really couldn't swim. But, Naoto said he was afraid of getting sunburned. So, Toro took out some sunscreen. She immediately pulled off Naoto's shirt to apply sunscreen for him, which made Naoto nervous. He was afraid they would drag him into the water. When Toro wanted to apply sunscreen on him, Naoto said he and Toro weren't a couple. So, they couldn't do this. This made Toro angry. She squeezed sunscreen onto Naoto and started rubbing it on him using her feet. When Yoshi wanted to join in, Toro quickly stopped her. Unexpectedly, Maki joined in too, leaving Naoto completely helpless. Finally, they used up all the sunscreen. After that, Toro dragged Naoto into the ocean, and they had a lot of fun playing together. By the evening, Naoto returned home. Toro called to ask if he got sunburned. But Naoto only felt sore, because he had too much sunscreen rubbed on him. Naoto had finished a drawing of Toro. At that moment, he realized today was the summer festival. So, he thought Toro might invite him to go. While Naoto was at home playing games, he realized he should take the initiative to invite her for once. But he was still hesitant. In the end, he went to the festival alone. He saw that everyone was with someone else. So, he planned to buy something and leave. Suddenly, he ran into Maki and Yoshi. Thus, they immediately started chasing him. When they caught Naoto, the two girls continued teasing him, and they told Naoto that Toro was busy with club activities, so she couldn't come. Suddenly, they dragged Naoto to have fun with them. At that moment, Toro had just finished swim practice. She suddenly thought of Naoto. Unexpectedly, Maki and Yoshi had sent her photos, which made her jealous. So, she immediately ran to where they were. Toro saw Naoto wearing a collar, which amused her. So, she also wanted to walk Naoto like a pet. But Maki said she had to beat them first. Then, they competed in a stuffed animal shooting game, which they all enjoyed. At that moment, Toro asked Naoto, saying she thought he wouldn't usually come to places like this. Then, she realized Naoto had been waiting for her to invite him here, which flustered him. But she told Naoto that he should also take the initiative to invite her out sometimes. After that, they played many festival games together. In the end, Maki and Yoshi won more stuffed animals. But Toro's plushie was bigger than theirs. So, she was declared the winner. After that, Maki and Yoshi said their goodbyes, leaving only Naoto and Toro, which made things awkward. Toro then invited Naoto to keep walking with her. At that moment, Toro said they seemed like they were on a date, which made Naoto embarrassed. So, Toro continued teasing him. She told Naoto to hold her hand, which made him blush. When he was about to hold Toro's hand, suddenly, the fireworks started. So, Toro quickly pushed him to go watch. At that moment, they saw how crowded the place was. They had to wait in line. Suddenly, Naoto told Toro to follow him somewhere else. But she got pushed around by the crowd. Naoto quickly ran back and grabbed her hand, which made Toro blush. Then, he pulled her along as he ran up the mountain. Toro didn't understand why he brought her to such a quiet place. Unexpectedly, from there, they had a perfect view of the fireworks. It turned out this was the place where he watched fireworks as a child. Suddenly, Toro said, taking a girl to a secluded spot on a date is not good. He even pulled her hand and brought her here. So, Toro kept teasing him, calling him a bad guy. But Naoto noticed Toro was also embarrassed. Thus, he asked what the bad thing was, which flustered Toro. Since Naoto looked so serious, she blurted out, forcing someone into a kiss, which scared Naoto. Toro said that since he was a virgin, he wouldn't be able to do something like that. Naoto then asked, "Can you force a kiss on someone?" Which flustered Toro. When she was about to kiss Naoto, suddenly, they noticed other couples around them were kissing. So, they quickly ran away. Now, as they were walking back together, Toro regretted not wearing a yukata. Naoto thought she would look really cute in one, and he remembered what Toro had said at the festival. So, Naoto asked, "Next year, do you want to go to the festival with me?" Toro immediately agreed, but only if Naoto wore a matching outfit with her, which made Naoto blush. Now, the new school term had begun. Naoto just wanted to go home and play games. Suddenly, he overheard Toro's group chatting. He realized that her group of friends had one more girl, and lately, she hadn't been coming to find him. So, he felt like a mole that had wandered into a leopard's territory, and that he would return to his dark, lonely life. Suddenly, two guys came over to talk to them. So, Naoto continued observing. One of the guys was trying to ask Toro out, but she refused. Naoto saw that he was very uncomfortable. So, he decided to step forward. Accidentally, he was discovered by them. This made him embarrassed. At this moment, the two young men looked down on Naoto, because he seemed timid. Suddenly, Naoto invited Toro to go home with him. This made Toro very happy. So, she went home with Naoto. This surprised them. After that, the girls also went home with Naoto. They found the two young men very annoying. And Naoto had saved them. Sakura realized that he was the manga artist at the library. But Toro teased him, calling him a pervert. This amused them. The next morning, Toro noticed that Naoto's arms were very slender. So, she felt that he was even weaker than a girl. Toro suggested that Naoto go to the gym. This would make him look stronger. But, Naoto found working out troublesome. Because he needed to be persistent and endure pain. Toro felt that he was truly a failure. But, Naoto said he would work out if he didn't have to move. So, Toro came up with an idea. She made Naoto lie down on the floor. It turned out she wanted to sit on his back. Toro said this was a way to exercise without moving, forcing him to endure it. Toro told him to persevere for 10 minutes. But, Naoto realized that Toro was sitting on his back. That gave him the motivation to keep going. Suddenly, Toro rode on him. This made her very happy. But, they were caught, which made them embarrassed. So, Naoto collapsed. At this moment, Naoto was very sleepy. Because the previous week, he had stayed up for many days playing games. So, he couldn't focus on drawing. Toro reminded him that the midterms were in 4 days. This shocked him. Toro immediately realized he had been gaming too much. And that was not okay. She said if he continued like this, he would have to repeat a grade. This amused her. But, Naoto said it didn't matter if he repeated a grade, because he could stay in this club for another year. Toro explained, if he failed the grade, next year, he would be in the same class as her. And when he forgot his books, she would let him share hers. During PE class, she would cheer for Naoto. And after school, she would tutor him. This made Toro very happy, because she could call him ex-senpai. But, Naoto felt that studying with Toro wouldn't be boring. This made her blush. So, she scolded Naoto, saying she would feel nauseous seeing him every morning. The next day, Naoto started studying hard. But, Toro's group kept teasing him. They said he would fail for 2 or 3 years. And they would become his senpai. This shocked Naoto. He imagined having to serve them, even running errands to buy them food. This delighted them, while Naoto was feeling helpless. Suddenly, Sakura told him that they were actually more likely to fail than him, because all their grades were very low. So, they decided to study hard as well. At this point, Naoto had scored very well on the exam, because he had put in great effort to study. Toro thought he didn't want to be in the same class as her. The next day, Toro overheard Maki and Yoshi doing something to Naoto. This made her blush. So, she quickly stopped them. But, it turned out they were just pulling a splinter out of his finger. This made Toro radiate killing intent. So, she decided to help him instead. In the afternoon, the two walked home together. Toro was still angry at Naoto, because he easily helped other girls. It turned out he had helped Sakura before as well. But, Naoto saw it as something normal. Toro then suggested playing rock paper scissors with him. The loser would have to carry the winner's bag. Unexpectedly, Naoto won. So, Toro had to carry his bag. This made her very annoyed. When they reached another intersection, she wanted to play rock paper scissors again. This time, Naoto lost, which made Toro very happy. So, he had to carry her bag. At that moment, Toro felt like this was straight out of a manga. The one carrying something heavy is always stronger. This amused Toro. Now, they would play one final round. But, Naoto lost again. Suddenly, she wanted Naoto to carry her on his back. This made him nervous. He was afraid that others would see. But, Toro still made him carry her. She noticed that Naoto was blushing, because he had never carried anyone before. At that moment, Naoto felt she was really heavy. So, he tried to lift her up. Accidentally, his hand touched Toro's butt. This made them both embarrassed. So, Toro quickly ran away. Naoto thought she was angry at him. That night, Naoto was waiting for Toro to text him. When she finally did, it made him really happy. She told Naoto to guess what she was doing. Suddenly, she called him and said she was taking a bath. This sent Naoto into a panic, because he never expected her to call while bathing. Toro guessed that Naoto was imagining her, which amused her, while Naoto was trying to calm down. Unexpectedly, Toro accidentally pressed the video call button. This shocked Naoto. When Toro realized she was calling the wrong video, she was also shocked. At that moment, Naoto had seen everything, so he could only apologize. This made them both extremely embarrassed. The next morning, Naoto was practicing drawing, but Toro was practicing boxing nearby, because she had been reading Naoto's boxing manga, which made her really excited. Suddenly, she wanted Naoto to train with her. This made him nervous, but Toro said he only needed to stand still like a punching bag. Naoto was still scared. This amused Toro, so she kept punching him. Accidentally, Naoto fell onto Toro. This made them both embarrassed. Naoto thought she was about to kill him, but Toro saw the hug as Naoto's secret technique. Later, she told her friends about it. They thought the hug move was a dirty trick. So, Sakura told Toro to wrestle with him instead. But boxing doesn't involve wrestling, so they decided to find Naoto for training. Toro quickly stopped them, because she didn't want anyone touching Naoto except her. But they were still determined to find Naoto for training. So, Toro had to fight them. At that moment, Naoto was exhausted. He just wanted a quiet place to draw. But Toro's group kept disturbing him. This made him feel helpless. He reminded them that this wasn't a place to play around. But they explained that the boys were too noisy playing games in the cafeteria. So, they had to come here. And they decided this place was now their new chat room. Naoto felt completely powerless. However, he didn't expect them to actually give in to the boys. Toro told him he was too naive, because they had another plan. This scared Naoto. At that moment, Sakura approached the boys and started talking to them, which made them excited. It turned out she was seducing them to make them jealous of each other. This caused them to break apart and leave. While Naoto was still frightened, he realized he should never make enemies with these girls. Suddenly, they wondered if Naoto was a fool for women. So, Toro told him to try kissing her. But he didn't dare. Toro was certain he was afraid of girls. Maki said he was still a virgin. So, his true nature hadn't been revealed yet. This led to an argument between her and Toro. So, they decided to make a bet. Toro was convinced that Naoto had hidden an adult manga in this room. She immediately started searching. Meanwhile, Naoto was getting nervous, because he actually did have a manga. But he only considered it a romance manga, and it was hidden in the next room. After 15 minutes, Toro still hadn't found anything. So, Maki assumed Naoto was just an innocent little lamb. Suddenly, Naoto brought the manga into the room, and he deliberately let Toro find it. This excited her, because she had won the bet. The next day, Toro came to see Naoto again. He noticed that Toro had gotten an ear piercing. So, he complimented her, saying the earring suited her well. This made Toro very happy. Suddenly, she wanted to pierce Naoto's ear too, which terrified him, because he thought it would be very painful. But Toro said they would wear matching earrings together, which made Naoto blush. However, he was still really scared. He thought Toro had already pierced his ear, but he didn't feel anything. Turns out, Toro was just messing with him. Suddenly, Sakura came looking for Naoto. She wanted him to help her, which made Toro jealous. It turned out that someone had been stalking Sakura, and the stalker was still watching her. This made everyone worried. Sakura was very scared. So, they told Naoto to do something. Suddenly, Sakura asked Naoto for a favor. She wanted him to pretend to be her boyfriend, which shocked both Naoto and Toro. Sakura believed that if she had a boyfriend, the stalker would stop following her. Naoto felt awkward, because Toro was staring at him. Toro immediately objected. She didn't think the stalker would believe Naoto was Sakura's boyfriend. She even said Naoto might end up becoming a stalker himself. But Sakura still insisted on Naoto's help. So, he agreed, which left Toro completely stunned. The next morning, Naoto arrived at the meeting spot with Sakura. Since they were pretending to be on a date, Sakura noticed that Naoto was very tense. So, she told him to just let her take the lead. This made Naoto think she was about to get really close to him. While Maki was enjoying herself, Toro kept staring at them. Maki realized that Toro was jealous. So, she said they should pretend like that. Maybe they would actually fall in love. But Toro didn't believe Naoto knew how to date. At that moment, Sakura asked him, "Do you have someone you want to date?" But he didn't have anyone yet. While Naoto was wondering where the stalker was, suddenly, Toro had already caught him. He apologized and promised not to do it again. It turned out Toro didn't want them to keep pretending to date, which surprised everyone. As the stalker ran away, they were finally able to go home. Toro continued teasing Naoto for not being able to date Sakura and escape his single life, making Naoto embarrassed. But he felt like it was okay. The next morning, Toro said she would give him something interesting. When he found out it was a selfie of her, Naoto was surprised. He immediately imagined something, but it was just snapping hot chicken. She then teased Naoto, making him embarrassed. At that moment, Naoto was training for a marathon, which made him exhausted. The girls saw him getting overtaken by others. In the afternoon, Toro went to find Naoto. She scolded him for being terrible at running marathons. But Naoto said he just wanted to draw, so he didn't want to do anything else. This made Toro angry at his excuse. She said she would give him special training the next day. The next morning, Naoto was waiting for Toro. When she arrived, he was surprised, because she looked really hot in sportswear. Then they started marathon training. But when Naoto saw Toro from behind, it suddenly gave him motivation to run ahead. Very quickly, he became exhausted again. At that moment, Toro called Naoto useless because even elementary school kids could run faster than him. This made Naoto angry. Toro kept insulting him harshly, so he continued running. Finally, they finished their training, leaving Naoto completely worn out. After that, Toro told him to stretch his muscles. This would help him avoid soreness after training. But Naoto's body was very stiff, so Toro helped him stretch, which caused him a lot of pain. Accidentally, Yoshi saw them, and she thought they were fusing like Goku. At that moment, Naoto was worried about finding a model. Toro overheard by chance, which made her curious. It turned out Naoto needed a model for the school's cultural festival. She said if he begged her, she would be his model. But he refused, which shocked Toro. It turned out he was looking for a male student to draw, because Naoto found it difficult to look at female students while drawing. But Toro pulled out the previous photo to tease him, so Naoto ended up agreeing to draw her. However, Toro had to prepare a cosplay outfit matching the sketch herself, which shocked her. Naoto thought she wouldn't be able to find the cosplay outfit. Sometime later, Naoto assumed she had given up, but Toro had found the cosplay outfit. Surprising him, it turned out she had asked someone to make it for her. But Naoto didn't say anything, which made Toro angry because he didn't give her a single compliment. Then, Naoto started drawing Toro, but her pose was too seductive, making it impossible for him to focus. Toro mentioned that the school's cultural festival was next week, and she would be selling fried noodles. Maki and Yoshi would run a haunted house. She asked what his club would be doing, which made Naoto recall the previous year. Back then, the art club president guided him through organizing an art exhibition. Thanks to that, their exhibition was a success, and she thanked Naoto for his help. But the president announced that next year, she would have to focus on preparing for the university entrance exams for art school, so she wouldn't be able to participate in club activities anymore. She entrusted the art club to Naoto. At that moment, Toro noticed Naoto was lost in thought. He explained that he was remembering last year's cultural festival. They thought no one would come to Naoto's art exhibition, so they decided to help him. Toro said she would organize games at the exhibition, or they could open a cosplay cafe, which excited the girls. Suddenly, Naoto heard very familiar footsteps, so he quickly told Toro's group to hide. It turned out his club president had arrived, which surprised Naoto. She asked what the art club would be doing this year. Naoto said he would continue holding an art exhibition, but she noticed the leftover food on the table, and she had heard rumors that the art club had become a gathering place for troublemaking students, which made her angry. Meanwhile, Toro's group thought the president was terrifying. Suddenly, she spotted Naoto's paintings, so she decided to disband the club, shocking Naoto. Out of nowhere, Toro stopped her. Toro accused her of acting too arbitrarily, saying she had abandoned the club for too long. The president argued that the club members no longer had the heart to paint, but Toro explained that Naoto had been working hard on his own, and that he took his art very seriously. So, the president decided to test Naoto. She told him to organize his own art exhibition. If his exhibition lost to hers, the club would be disbanded. This excited Toro. Meanwhile, Toro's group was mocking how serious the president was. But Naoto told them not to make fun of her. This made them think she was Naoto's ex-girlfriend. So, Toro asked what his chances of winning were. But, Naoto said there was a 100% chance he would lose to the president. Toro said they would help him. Maki suggested they open an art-made cafe. They believed they could win. But, Naoto explained that the art club exhibition organized by the president last year was ranked very high. She even won numerous awards in various competitions. Then, Naoto showed them her paintings. It turned out she painted nudes, which made Toro jealous because Naoto had kept this from her. But, Naoto defended himself, saying it was purely for art. At that moment, Toro suggested she could be Naoto's model. However, Naoto refused because he wasn't confident he could create a perfect piece of art. Maki then compared Toro's chest to the president's, saying they would lose because of that. This made Toro furious. They kept making comparisons, which disappointed Toro. Suddenly, Naoto said that Toro wasn't inferior to the president, because Toro had her own unique charm. This made Toro excited, since it was the first time he had ever complimented her. So, they decided to paint cosplay-themed artwork. Unexpectedly, Toro had already prepared a costume. Maki told Naoto to do his best, because if he lost, the club would be disbanded. That afternoon, Naoto was still practicing drawing Toro. But, she felt his painting was too ordinary. Naoto thought being ordinary wasn't so bad. So, Toro decided to help Naoto win. The next morning, she wore a swimsuit for Naoto to draw her. But, he still couldn't draw well. So, Toro changed into a different outfit. She felt he was improving a little. Then, Toro switched to a more revealing outfit, which excited Maki's group. Suddenly, Naoto said he just needed to draw normally. They had no idea what he was planning to draw, because if they kept going like this, they would lose. Naoto insisted he would fight the president on his own, because he didn't want to trouble Toro any further. This made her angry, and she stormed off. The next morning, Naoto saw that the art room had been split in two. He realized it was the president's doing. Even though Naoto knew he had no chance of winning, he still continued to do his best. That afternoon, the president came to see him, which surprised Naoto, because she was dressed very seductively. She noticed that Naoto's painting was terrible, since viewers wouldn't want to look at something that felt like a student's homework. And she said the most important thing in a piece of art is love, which shocked Naoto. Suddenly, Toro came looking for him. She thought the president was modeling for Naoto, which made her furious, and she stormed off. Out of nowhere, the president told Naoto to chase after her, because art is something you have to pursue. So, Naoto immediately ran after Toro. He remembered the time he spent with her, which made him feel warm inside, because those were his happiest moments. So, Naoto kept running after Toro. They ended up at the swimming pool. Naoto said to Toro, "Be my model." But, Toro was still jealous. She told Naoto to go ask the president instead. Suddenly, she slipped. Luckily, Naoto caught her just in time. But, he declared, he just wants Toro to be a simple model for him, because he found her everyday life the most fascinating. It made both of them blush. Accidentally, they fell into the pool. At that moment, Naoto saw that Toro's clothes had become see-through. But, she quickly cheered up again. As they were heading back together, Toro couldn't understand what was so fascinating about her everyday life. Naoto said that he found her adorable. It made both of them blush. So, Toro wanted to hear him say it again, which made him embarrassed. The next morning, everyone saw that Naoto had drawn a beautiful picture of Toro. Maki asked him what his theme was. Naoto said his theme was Toro's everyday life. But, Maki thought they looked more like a couple. At that moment, they started getting curious about the president's artwork. So, they wanted to go check it out. Toro noticed that Naoto looked nervous. She told him that he would definitely win. After Toro's group saw the president's artwork, Toro immediately fainted. They said the president's art had reached a whole new level, because her artwork had become extremely seductive. Naoto's usual drawings wouldn't be able to win against hers. So, they thought Toro needed to be more seductive. Just as they were about to pull something off, Naoto believed he would find a way. The next day, Naoto and the president were preparing for the art exhibition. She declared that she wouldn't go easy on Naoto. So, he had to give it his all to compete with her. At that moment, the cultural festival had begun. While Naoto didn't know how to answer an interview, Toro's group suddenly arrived. They cosplayed as cats to help attract people to the exhibition. This excited the other students. Then Toro quickly pulled a group of male students into Naoto's art exhibition. They found Toro adorable, so they wanted to ask her out. Meanwhile, the president's exhibition was also very crowded. Naoto realized that his side had fewer visitors than hers. Even though Toro was still trying her best, Naoto saw her playing around with others, which made him feel annoyed. Suddenly, two girls approached him. They found Naoto's artwork beautiful, which made Toro jealous. At that moment, they were having lunch together. But Toro was still mad at Naoto because his drawings were popular with the female students. However, Naoto said it was all thanks to Toro for being his model, which made her embarrassed. So, she cheered up again. After that, they went to eat together. When they returned, they discovered that the president's exhibition room had been shut down by the Public Morals Committee chief because her artwork violated the school's rules. But she argued that her paintings were works of art. Toro's group realized that the president was being punished, so they thought they had won. Suddenly, Naoto stepped into the room. He acknowledged that the president's paintings were of a very high level, and that she always painted with her emotions, just like he did when drawing Toro, which made her blush. Toro also admitted that the president's paintings were beautiful. They even had proof that many people appreciated them from an artistic perspective. In the end, everything was resolved. At that moment, the president came to thank Naoto for helping her. Suddenly, Toro teased the president because she had lost to them. So, Naoto had won. She decided not to disband the art club anymore. However, Toro's group still wanted to punish her. By the afternoon, Naoto had finished cleaning up. Suddenly, he saw the president wearing a bunny cosplay outfit. It turned out she was being punished and had to sell Toro's cat keychains. But this outfit inspired her to paint, which made Naoto embarrassed. At that moment, Toro's group had earned a lot of money, which excited them. When Toro went to look for Naoto, she saw the president changing clothes in front of him. So, she quickly stopped them. At that moment, the president saw Naoto's drawings. She praised him, saying his art was excellent because he had poured all his love into his paintings, which made Naoto feel shy. Just then, they realized there would be a music festival in the evening. So, Toro excitedly pulled Naoto and ran off. The next morning, Naoto was drawing Toro, which made her very happy. So, she wanted to reward Naoto. Unexpectedly, she kissed him. That's it for today's video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support Oni-chan in the next videos. Thank you for watching. Love you all.